Hollywood has always been a dangerous place for directors, no less dangerous than for actors and actresses. You could get shot for your very first mistake. In harsher times, for the sake of a bright future, hundreds of directors had to perish, maybe even thousands. The fate of most of them hardly worried anyone, so we don't even know about their deaths. These days, ending your career has gotten harder. The amount of content has grown many times over, and now directors get hired through help-wanted ads, more often even without them, since everybody has friends of friends and relatives. Naturally, getting rid of the legacy of the Middle Ages completely didn't work out. The world isn't ready for that yet. So the rare specimens still show up, the ones who manage to finish themselves off against all odds, with everything they've got. And yes, you still can't say bad things about the producers and the studio. On that front, nothing has changed. The director of Fantastic Four, Josh Trank, wasn't especially quick on the uptake and got to feel the studio's wrath on his own back. Josh is somewhere out there now, but nobody knows exactly where. True, in 2020, he briefly resurfaced with Capone and Tom Hardy, and the film sank just as quietly as it popped up, and Josh dissolved again. And yeah, you can't yell at women anymore now. As of recently, Hollywood has recognized the human being in a woman and keeps a strict eye out so they don't get hurt. And if it suddenly turns out that 20 years ago someone like Joss Whedon, according to press reports, was pitting women against each other on set, then the punishment won't keep you waiting. Now, Whedon is somewhere out there too, somewhere over there with Josh Trank. He botched his comeback attempt with the series The Nevers and ran away from it. In the earlier years, there was less diversity on this front. A director was even allowed to beat actors with sticks and starve them, and it was always believed that this made the actors perform better. Critics are still wildly delighted by the working methods of Stanley Kubrick or Alfred Hitchcock. What would have happened to these professionals if they were shooting their films these days? You can only guess. Then again, we can guess. They died at just the right moment. A winning tactic, worth a closer look. The scariest charge for directors, especially beginners, was the box office flop. If you had successes behind you, especially big ones, one or two flops could be forgiven. Harsh Hollywood is especially harsh, precisely toward newcomers. They were forbidden to flop. Today we'll have one such director, or rather, one woman. Yes, everyone now knows that Hollywood hated women, and we'll recall one such end of a career. And along the way, we'll recall a couple of respected creators who had to leave Hollywood because of flops. Some of them have been preparing to come back for several years now, but the time hasn't come yet. It would be curious to watch. True, comebacks often end badly, especially when people come back at an age that, in Quentin Tarantino's opinion, no longer lets you make anything good. But more on Quentin himself later. Tarantino's career isn't over yet, and Quentin isn't a fan of flopping. So today we have specialists who made some expensive movie that the audience didn't go see. Or went, but got suspicious of something. The studios noticed this and couldn't forgive the directors for it. Not every director who vanishes after a loud flop is one to feel sorry for. Nature tends towards self-cleansing, and sometimes it wants to cleanse itself of someone like Gore Verbinski. Once upon a time, Gore delivered Mouse Hunt, then The Ring, worked his way up to Pirates of the Caribbean, and became one of the most respected and recognizable directors in Hollywood. After 3 films about Johnny Depp, they threw any bag of money at him, and in 2013, they threw more than $200 million into The Lone Ranger. Everyone remembers the result, one of the biggest flops in Disney's history. But Gore had flown too high, so he still had a shot with the film A Cure for Wellness. This was entirely his movie. He's the writer, producer, director, and one-man band here. They gave him $40 million and he brought in only 26, after which Gore Verbinski was no more. Once every couple of years, he's sure to resurface with some new project that somebody is just about to fund. And in 2024, according to press reports, he finally managed to get the money. Maybe at the end of this year or somewhere in the next we'll find out what he made and whether he'll be able to come back. Quentin Tarantino has his doubts. Verbinski is already 60, and that's it. But Ridley Scott made Gladiator at 60, which means Gore has a small chance. At some point, Verbinski, who who had gone all over the Caribbean in Johnny Depp's company, decided to swap the cruise vacation for a wellness retreat and picked an alpine sanatorium for it, which is where the action of A Cure for Wellness takes place. Clean mountain air, a cozy room, healing springs, and relaxation. I'm planning to come back to Verbinski when his first film in nearly a decade comes out. For now, let's dwell on other flops that sank careers. Ishtar is probably one of the most amazing Hollywood films, from that category where every mistake the creators could possibly make during production, they made. But, for example, they started shooting the movie in Morocco and the Sahara instead of Nevada, as originally planned, only because Coca-Cola had money stuck in the country that it couldn't legally take out. In the mid-80s, Colombia was owned by none other than Coca-Cola. It was decided to put that money into a big Hollywood blockbuster. Everyone was shoved onto a steamer and hauled off to Morocco. Later, one of the film's producers said that Ishtar was the only project in his career where the word "no" didn't exist. Any whim of the producers or the stars was fulfilled instantly. Need a blue-eyed camel? Here's a suitcase of money. It's really hard to find? Here's another suitcase. The one you found got eaten by bad people? Here's money for one more. The eaten camel is not a joke. In Morocco, you don't joke around with bad people. Some evil people had mined the spot where they planned to shoot. Here's gold to pay the professionals who'll run around the desert looking for mines. A flare-up of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and there are threats to kidnap Dustin Hoffman and do something horrible to him. Here's a suitcase to hire armed guards who'll run around Dustin and protect him from everything horrible. In short, there were no problems with money on the shoot. The film was directed by Elaine May. She was a well-known Hollywood screenwriter, and not the most ordinary kind. She was a polisher. That's when a script exists, but somebody isn't happy with it, so they hire a special person who can rework it and turn it into a gem. Such writers usually don't get listed in the credits, but often they're the ones who turn the existing text into something completely different. And it was Elaine May who was credited with the success of Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty and Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman. Both actors were very grateful to her, and Beatty, who in those years carried a lot of clout in Hollywood, pushed May into the director's chair on Ishtar. As he himself said, he wanted to give her a chance, since because of the nature of her work, various awards and recognition pass her by. In 2022, Elaine May was given an honorary Oscar for her contribution to cinema. The studio agreed to Beatty's proposal, since she was also supposed to write the screenplay for Ishtar, and nobody doubted her professionalism there. After which, Beatty ran off to Dustin Hoffman. At first he refused, afraid of a flop, but after meeting May, he agreed. Beatty and Hoffman were each paid $5 million for the film. Very solid fees for the mid-80s, roughly like $15 million each today. The problems appeared on the very first day of shooting in Morocco. May started warring with Isabella Adjani, who had the lead female role. So the shooting day would begin with Adjani and May lunging at each other. This happened because Adjani demanded more shots of her, while May figured Adjani was only here because of Warren Beatty, and her role wasn't worth that many shots. Beatty, who was dating Adjani in those years, tried to act like he had nothing to do with it and kept a low profile. Dustin Hoffman bustled around with the sedatives. And while they were being calmed down, the sappers ran around trying to make sure nobody blew up. On set, Elaine May was quickly nicknamed the Imperial Stormtrooper. She wrapped herself in white capes, wound gauze fabric around her whole body, smeared herself with every cream she could find, and put on enormous sunglasses. The idea was that this would save her from the blazing sun. They say the look was worth every penny, and that money started flying off at a terrifying speed. May had adopted Stanley Kubrick's shooting approach. For example, they spent 50 takes on Vulture's Landing, and would have spent more. But Warren Beatty howled, and Elaine had to make do with what she had. Because of this, the shoot quickly fell behind schedule. The film's cinematographer Giuseppe Rotuno had to leave the set. His contract on another film was burning. He was quickly replaced by Vittorio Storaro, who, unlike Rotuno, didn't sit quietly in a corner thinking pleasant thoughts, but also diligently squabbled with May over every shot. All these conflicts and delays quickly leaked into the Hollywood press. In newspapers and magazines, Ishtar started getting mockingly called the Gate of Failure, or Warren's Gate, by analogy with one of the biggest flops of the early 80s, Heaven's Gate. Other names got used too, like the Road to Ruin. Because of all this, Warren Beatty was constantly freaking out, and the scandals on set started happening not once a day, but once an hour. So Dustin Hoffman got a specific job as a separator. He was supposed to jump on Warren Beatty whenever the man snapped and charged at Elaine with his fists. For this, he quickly earned the nickname the Peacemaker on set. It was reported that it never came to actual fistfights. Hoffman reacted instantly and managed to get between Beatty and May, who had to shout in his face or at his back. On some days, everyone sat tight and shot nothing. Some Moroccan government counter-terrorism operation would kick off, helicopters flew around, and somebody was getting shot at. By the middle of the shooting process, everyone had already gotten used to the day, starting with a fight between Ajani and May, continuing with screaming at the cinematographer, then the Moroccan military and guerrillas shooting at each other all around, and the day ending with Warren Beatty howling. After one such day, May walked off the set for a whole week. This forced Beatty to run to the studio with complaints and demand they somehow influence May. The studio proposed radical measures: fire her and have Beatty finish shooting everything himself. To which Beatty responded with a refusal. Hoffman later recounted that he talked with Beatty on set, and Beatty insisted he couldn't do it, since he had always supported women in Hollywood and fought for their rights. He had personally dragged May into the movie, and his affairs with hundreds of actresses were already common knowledge, something he often gets scolded for, with people suspecting that his defense of women was a sham. And what would happen if it also became known that he'd kicked May to the curb? Since the studio wouldn't listen to the actor and tried to toss May off the set through the producers, Beatty again had to run to the studio and threaten with his own departure from the film this time. Dustin Hoffman ran after him, also insisting he'd run off right behind Beatty. So May was kept on, and nothing changed. When the movie was somehow finished and taken to the editing room, it got even worse. Everyone started cutting their own versions of the film. Any attempts to combine these versions ran into a stream of various bad words. Warren Beatty even kicked the film's producer David Putnam out of the editing room when he came at him with his sensible advice. Elaine May also refused everyone edits to her version and showed it to no one. Dustin Hoffman, who had also assembled his own version of Ishtar, was ready to cooperate on his own terms. But nobody was interested in that kind of cooperation, so nobody even watched Dustin's version. Elaine's editing version was torn out of her hands by the studio itself. Talking her into it took several months, and it ended only when May started threatening a lawsuit. You'll often hear that Warren Beatty was to blame for everything, and it was because of him that the film turned into what it turned into. People treat this version with distrust because of producer David Putnam, who got kicked to the curb by Beatty. It's precisely he who, in all his interviews, hangs the lion's share of the film's problems on Beatty, maybe because the kick to the curb was just a bit too hard. Ishtar was only the fifth film in history at the time of its release whose production budget officially crossed the $50 million mark. And it was precisely this film's flop that forced Coca-Cola to sell Columbia to Sony, which owns it to this day. On top of that, the studio also spent enormous money promoting the picture, even though the head of the marketing department demanded the opposite, cutting the advertising budget to the minimum, insisting the movie would flop spectacularly and they'd just lose even more than they could afford. The premiere originally planned for 1986 had to be pushed to 1987. And here, even non-specialist publications started burying the picture, predicting one of the loudest flops in history and burying the careers of everyone from May to Dustin Hoffman along the way. Ishtar hit theaters in May of 1987 and managed to bring in only $14 million on a budget of $55. The studio also gets blamed for the unfortunate release date. The movie came out a week before Beverly Hills Cop 2, which took $26 million on opening and crushed the box office of every film in theaters. Although for several weeks before its release, the box office was relatively empty and no big hits were coming out there, which could have let Ishtar bring in an extra $5 to $10 million. Critics destroyed the movie, and Elaine May got a Golden Raspberry for it as Worst Director. Her name is the one linked to the appearance in Hollywood of the term director's jail. That's when, after some flop, a director gets a black mark and can no longer find work as a director in Hollywood. Over various years, many filmmakers were sent there, unofficially, of course. It's assumed that's where the already mentioned Gore Verbinski is, too, who is now making an attempt to climb out of it, or Richard Kelly, who delivered Donnie Darko and then Southland Tales. Beatty and May didn't speak for several years, but then they made up. In 2008, May presented Beatty with an award for various achievements, and this moment is considered to have marked their reconciliation. Everyone involved in the production doesn't like to remember this movie. Dustin Hoffman is usually the most talkative, but even he tries to turn it all into a joke. In one interview, where he was present with Robert De Niro, when asked which job he regretted, Dustin answered that he regretted nothing. But if he were Robert De Niro, he'd be very upset about the film Ishtar. Bruce Willis could genuinely be called a killer of directors. He took out at least 4 of them. You could also add Richard Donner to the list of Bruce's victims, since after the flop of 16 Blocks, he never directed anything again. But the director of Lethal Weapon was already 75, and he probably could have retired to a well-earned rest on his own initiative anyway. And in 2021, Donner was no more. But Bruce didn't spare the likes of Richard Rush or Rowdy Harrington. Well, makes sense. If someone couldn't make a good film with Bruce in his best years, then you might as well stop making anything and just jump out the window right away. Sometimes directors leave on their own, without Bruce Willis's help, like Martin Brest, who delivered Beverly Hills Cop and Scent of a Woman, and then made Giggly in 2003. The film got trashed so powerfully, and so much discouraging stuff came flying at Martin that he took offense, declared that Hollywood was decay, and left the movie business. Director Paul Verhoeven also ended his Hollywood career without anyone's help. Hollow Man was the film that drew the line. It didn't become a big box office flop, it was more of a shortfall. But Verhoeven had been walking toward this event for a long time, so even a shortfall was enough. Although Verhoeven himself insists there were offers, it's just that on Hollow Man he realized it was over. They started pressuring him and forbidding him from doing a lot of things, so the movie turned out not to be his. He's certain that the exact same film could have been made by any other director, and that means it's time. The offer to direct Hollow Man came to Verhoeven after the epic box office flop of Starship Troopers. On its release, the film got hammered hard for fascism, propaganda of militarism, lousy actors, excessive violence, and everything else. It even got hammered for the bugs and the cows. The authors made excuses that no real bugs were squashed and the cows were computer-drawn, but people believed them only after the film had already been spat on. These days, the picture's ratings aren't so bad, especially the audience ones, but on release things were a little different. The number of offers dropped many times over, and Verhoeven agreed to Hollow Man, figuring he'd have room to spread out there. After all, the producers around him had gotten so brazen that they offered him the directing job on Disney's Dinosaur, and that was already insulting. In the 2010s, Verhoeven would say that he understood his career was coming to an end, and he was trying to stay in Hollywood, which is why he went along with all the restrictions on Hollow Man. And when the movie turned out not particularly successful, he decided to slam the door. He didn't want to slide even lower. Unlike Ishtar, where the word no didn't exist, on Hollow Man that was the only word that did. Only occasionally did the director manage to push through some episode that seemed important to him. Watching the film, it's immediately clear which episodes are meant, but it wasn't only the director who had to suffer on the shoot. In the first days, Elizabeth Shue, running through the corridors, tore her Achilles tendon and was out for nearly 2 months. The producers wanted to replace her, but after a brainstorm they reshuffled the schedule a bit and then took a whole month off. Kevin Bacon had to suffer too. He said he signed the contract largely because he wanted to rest and figured his invisible man would be played by someone else, while he himself lounged on a beach somewhere with a mojito. But Verhoeven figured the beach could wait, and nobody would handle wearing the green and blue jumpsuits better than Kevin. Bacon griped that instead of the easiest film, Hollow Man unexpectedly turned into the most physically demanding film of his career. On top of all the bonuses, the entire crew also poked fun at him. He was constantly running around in a colorful skin-tight leotard, and because of the laughter, the takes often got ruined, so he had to run again and again. Verhoeven claimed the plan called for Bacon's absence, and they tried to shoot without him, with somebody else. But the actors worked unconvincingly with outside people, so they had to stuff Kevin into the leotard, even though he was showing signs of aggression. But it was even better that way. Kevin was angry and added tension to the scenes, especially after people started snickering at him. The fact that this wasn't quite the director's film is also noticeable from the ratings board. This is the first Hollywood project of the director's that was given an adult rating right away. All the others, even Total Recall, had to be trimmed and re-edited to get the adult rating. They always got either a harsher one or an outright pornographic one. Although, to be fair, they'd have given it here too. It's just that the studio, even before sending the picture to the board, cut out a rape scene, leaving only the intro. When Verhoeven tells how he was squeezed into a box, and it also comes out that a scene like that was shot, you always want to ask, so what kind of box was that exactly? Hollow Man cost $95 million, and nearly 50 of it went to everything related to visual effects. In those years, the authors had to invent a lot on the fly and redo not the most successful ideas, even though the studio had expected to make the movie for 60 to 70 million. Maybe because of that cost overrun, Verhoeven got even more problems in Hollywood. At the box office, the film brought in $191 million. It most likely did decently on home media, since a few years later it got a sequel that flew straight to DVD. But there are no numbers here, so you can only guess. And the upset Verhoeven left Hollywood and made his next European film, Black Book, only 6 years later. And here, by the way, Tarantino misses again. Having left Hollywood at 60, Verhoeven then delivered Elle and made Benedetta when he was already past 80, so you can definitely spread out after 60, just not in Hollywood. After the flop of Gods of Egypt, director Alex Proyas ended up somewhere in limbo. He had managed to direct The Crow, Dark City, I, Robot, and Knowing, and was considered very talented. But Gods of Egypt sank too powerfully, getting scathing criticism and mediocre ratings from ordinary viewers along the way. And Alex vanished. True, in his case, there's also a bit of a personality issue. Alex loves to tell everyone how bad the producers are and what talentless people he has to deal with. In the last couple of years, he tirelessly attacked the remake of The Crow, telling everyone what trash they were shooting there and how many people found through help wanted ads were being used in it. The remake came out in 2024 and flopped with a bang, so maybe Proyas wasn't so wrong after all. Or maybe his own disappearance is tied to something similar. But directors of varying quality are prone to disappearing. Some of them you feel sorry for, and some you don't, like Marcus Nispel, who evaporated in the mid-2010s. In 2006, Marcus made The Mighty Pathfinder, in which Carl Urban, overcoming the cameraman's epileptic seizures and the editor's alcoholism, battled in the smoke against the incoming Vikings who had gathered to seize Native American land, outrunning the English. The film flopped with a wild crash, under 8% positive reviews from critics, and went off to sell pies. Carl Urban was rescued a couple of years later by J.J. Abrams, who picked him up at the station and invited him into his Star Trek. Marcus, meanwhile, went off to make Friday the 13th. He made it relatively successfully in box office terms, but because of the huge advertising budget, the studio decided not to continue, having earned a couple of crumbs. A bird in the hand is better than a crane somewhere out there. Marcus was given Conan the Barbarian to make, in which he wanted to bury Jason Momoa too. Conan was a long time in the making. In the early 2000s, Warner Brothers was going to deliver Conan. It was meant to be a continuation, or as we'd say now, a soft reboot. That is, Arnold was supposed to be used for a couple of minutes. He was to play the father of the new Conan. Robert Rodriguez was the director for a while, then Brett Ratner, who delivered Rush Hour. But the great screenplay couldn't write itself, and the writers couldn't manage it. Warner Brothers got tired and didn't extend the rights. They went to the studio Millennium. Ratner stayed on the project, but the film stalled again, and then he ran away. After him, Marcus Nispel showed up. Chris Hemsworth could have shown up too, but at the auditions, Jason Momoa beat him out. They decided Conan had to be dirty, smelly, and hairy, which would emphasize his ruggedness. With Hemsworth, they'd have had to fuss around a lot longer, while Jason was born for a role like this. Conan is also curious in that the creators of John Wick worked on Jason Momoa in it. Jason, once he showed up on the film, personally brought in stuntmen Chad Stahelski and David Leitch for his physical training. Both of them are successful directors these days. The first delivered all the films in the John Wick series, and the second, after working on the first part, went off to earn money in other places and made Deadpool 2, Bullet Train, with Brad Pitt and Hobbs and Shaw. Mickey Rourke was also supposed to be in the film. But sometimes Mickey had moments of clarity, and he'd start suspecting something and seeing that very shopping cart in the supermarket that he tried to forget. So, jumping off the departing Conan train at the last moment, he managed to hop onto Immortals. Momoa, meanwhile, said that because of the Conan role, he turned down Guardians of the Galaxy, figuring Conan was the more winning bet. But here, what's most likely at work is that old saying, everything that happens happens for the best. Because of Drax, he'd clearly have lost another one of his future roles. There were no problems on the shoot. Most likely the problems arose at the test screenings, but the viewers died, so they didn't get a chance to share their impressions. Someone even went to see Conan in a theater, and there the film brought in a whole $63 million on a budget of $90. Critics and viewers gave it an average 5-point-something out of 10. Storm clouds gathered over Marcus Nispel. Jason, though, fully supported Marcus, telling everyone that he had personally written the script for the great sequel and that right after the premiere of the first part, they'd get in a helicopter and fly off to shoot the second, which would be even better. As we now know, they flew off in different directions, Marcus into the void and Jason underwater, and then into the family. Later, once Momoa's career took off and he became Aquaman, he remembered Conan again. And this time he didn't talk about the great script and didn't support Marcus. He reported that he wasn't to blame for anything and Conan was supposed to be a different film. But that's how it goes. You sign on to what seems like a great movie, and there are talentless people working on it who won't let you do anything no matter how hard you try, and then those people deliver a heap of manure. And even though, for you, it was supposed to be a breakthrough film where you did everything in your power not to let anyone down, in the end, it turns out you were flailing around in a heap of manure. Since 2011, Marcus Nispel has made only one small horror movie, which flew straight to home media and picked up an audience score of 3 out of 10. Nobody has seen him since, but Marcus is somewhere out there, and maybe he'll come back yet. Although here too, according to Tarantino's version, Marcus is done. He's 61, the same as Quentin himself. And Jason Momoa, meanwhile, survived both the flop of the second Aquaman and the shutdown of the entire DC cinematic universe, but he wasn't left without a role. James Gunn called him into the new DC universe to play Lobo. So Momoa did end up getting a comic book character after all, just not the one he once dropped Drax for. So we're waiting for a new film from Quentin with very great interest, since, in the maestro's own opinion, he's going to make some kind of trash. True, in 2024 he changed his mind about making his final 10th film, The Movie Critic, so it looks like we'll have to wait a bit more, and by his own logic that might even be for the best. And while Tarantino at 61 buries anyone over 60, Ridley Scott at 86 releases a second Gladiator. So maybe it's not about age after all. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.